Hello, and welcome to the latest episode of our series of podcasts to honour the 10th anniversary of IP Inclusive. I'm Max Walters, editor of Managing IP, and I'm joined, as always, by Jodie Bates of Boltway Tennant. Hi, Jodie.
Hi, Max.
And today with us we have Chelsea Chung. Chelsea's a trainee trademark attorney at Finnegan Europe and is a member of the IP Futures Committee. Hi, Chelsea.
Hello, happy to be here today.
Good to see you. And we also are joined again by Chris Burnett, who's a partner at Knights and is an ally of IP Inclusive and the IP Futures Committee. Hi, Chris.
Hi there.
Hi, and great to see you both, or to have you both with us. As I mentioned, Chelsea is a member of the IP Futures Committee, which is fortuitous, because today's discussion is all about tips and guidance for young professionals starting out in the IP sector and how we can create a more inclusive IP community. So I suppose, Chelsea, to put you on the spot straight away, or not put you on the spot, but to kick off the conversation, how do you think early career professionals can contribute to a more inclusive IP community? What's your take on that?
So I think the first one, which is probably the most obvious one, would really just try to be active allies. I think inclusion oftentimes isn't just about um the responsibility of leadership, say, but everyone actually plays a role, no matter at what stage of the career you are. Which, includes those at the beginning of their careers. And I think being an active ally means, for example, speaking up when you maybe witness exclusion, bias, microaggressions, which unfortunately probably still exist in certain areas in the
Mm,
profession, in any profession really. And even if it feels uncomfortable at times. So I think vice versa also means kind of amplifying the voices of others, especially some of those who might not feel as confident or as represented in the
mm,
room. Um, so I think a very simple example I can think of it would be maybe, like even speaking up in meetings. Like it could be tricky, but if
mm,
you were to ever notice a colleague being talked over, I think just kind of making a point to circle back to their point and asking for their input and just ensuring that the voice was heard.
mm,
Yeah. And then I think other ways could involve maybe joining DEI-led initiatives. So, for example, IP Inclusive, which is
mm,
such a great community,
mm,
and represents so many different subgroups within the professional community as well. And different mentoring schemes. I know that there are legal ones. I'm not too sure about IP specific ones outside of IP inclusive, but
mm,
definitely legal mentoring schemes, which I personally participated in quite a few as well during uni.
mm.
For example, aspiring solicitors and so on. Um, and DEI initiatives within the firms themselves, maybe. So for example, Finnegan Europe, or Finnegan in general has these affinity programs, which anyone, no matter where you're from, what background you're from, can participate in. So I
Okay.
think those would be really important as well.
What's the affinity program? How does that work?
They really just have monthly meetings. They invite everyone, anyone, specifically those from maybe more diverse backgrounds, but genuinely just very welcoming towards anyone. And
Mm,
monthly meetings where they just discuss relevant topics, issues, and um, celebrate cultural months together, for example. I
mm.
think, um, yeah, I think the most obvious, I
That's
think, I'm trying to think of an example. Yeah, like maybe, for example, Chinese New Year.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, everyone would celebrate those together, just having
Okay.
discussions and yeah, gather around it, which
Yeah,
is
that's a nice
very
idea.
nice.
Yeah, yeah. Chris, I mentioned at the start you're an ally to IP Futures and to IP Inclusive in general. What's your take on what Chelsea was saying there at the start about how we can create a more inclusive profession? Does some of what she was saying resonate with you as an ally? Is that Are they things that you'd endorse as well? You know, thinking speaking up in if you hear someone being talked over, etc., and encouraging participation amongst sort of the junior end of the profession.
Yeah, I think so. I got the.
Mm,
I remember sort of 10 years ago when IP Inclusive started, and I think a lot of
mm,
the ideas that were coming out were fairly. I know they've been talked about in other professions for donkey's years, but certainly for
mm,
IP, it was a bit of an eye opener. And I felt that it was like some of the people who've been in the sort of the younger members of the profession were the ones who were a bit more enthused about it and were going along to the events and talking about it.
mm,
And I think it was important to have people in. I was at AA Thornton at the time, and there were certainly champions there in the partnership and in HR who were very happy to take these ideas and run with them, and they were very encouraging. So I think it's very important to have sort of an enthusiasm for sort of listening to sort of anything that the younger early career professionals come up with and actually sort of taking it on board and I say championing people. You didn't want a sort of a hierarchy where it was we're in charge and everyone else just does as they're told. I think that's
mm,
the sort of what you try to avoid. Um, so I think having sort of support groups and mentoring and all that is very useful, but definitely having allies or at least people in sort of senior positions who sort of champion people in their early careers. And I know at my firm at the moment we have mentors
mm.
and other places I worked as well. You would have a mentor who's a senior member of staff who would be able to sort
Yeah.
of talk to you, and I think that's a very important thing.
I know there's such a thing a few years ago. It's definitely talked about not just mentoring but also reverse mentoring, which you might want to correct me if I'm wrong, Chelsea, Chris, and Jodie. But isn't the idea of that is where I suppose in traditional mentoring you'd have a very senior person mentoring a younger person, but the reverse mentoring, the younger person can actually kind of guide the more senior person through what they're thinking and their sort of approach to work and their challenges, and you get the best of sort of both. Yeah, the best of
Yeah,
both
I've heard of
opinions, I
that.
suppose. Maybe.
I've
Yeah.
never had to do it, but I think you kind
Mm,
of if you've got a good relationship with your colleagues anyway, you kind of get that
mm,
anyway. I know I get told what to do by my kids all the time, so maybe it's a bit like that.
mm,
But yeah, and I think that's a good idea. I mean, you've got to be able to sort of listen to each other, realize pick up ideas, and I don't think anyone knows everything, so you've got to be able to sort of share ideas and not and be open to new suggestions. And I think whether it's done formally, and you can have this 360 feedback and all these other fancy ways of
mm.
doing it, but I think just being open and having conversations with people is, informally is just as easy and probably a more effective way of doing it.
Chelsea, have you had much mentoring in your role, or?
Yeah, definitely, as in obtaining mentoring from my senior colleagues and I guess recently I've had a pleasure of mentoring our London offices, externs and interns as well. Both have been amazing. But yeah, just I think building up on Chris's point, I think reverse mentoring can definitely happen formally but
Mm,
also informally. I think the most straightforward example, I'm very fortunate to work with supervising colleagues who are very welcoming towards new ideas. And, they're always like, even though I'm technically your manager, you also are more than welcome to help me manage
mm,
me how to manage you in a sense. So it's like, just being active in maybe inviting conversations and discussions about
mm,
case management. Yeah, kind of like maybe sometimes following up on stuff and just making sure that schedules are aligned, that sort of thing, which are very informal, but I think plays such an integral part, such an
mm.
integral role as well, in that sort of mentoring, yeah.
What do you think are the main things that I guess there's lots of things, but the key things that seniors colleagues can learn from young people? Because I guess sometimes there can be a tendency to be a bit detached, can't they? Like we say, you don't understand Gen Z, whatever generation we're on now. I guess the question is, yeah, what can senior colleagues learn from junior professionals and younger professionals?
I think we're probably talking mostly about my impression is maybe the more so the Gen Z and millennial sort of
Mm,
crowd. I think so I'm a member of the Gen Z crowd myself, and I think,
okay. Right.
yeah, uh,
I
I
always get
think we're
confused as to what
mostly,
we're on now. There's Gen Z, there's Millennial, and there's Generation X, but I'm never quite sure which is supposed to be which. There's obviously, yeah, some crossover at some stage, but yeah.
yeah, no, definitely. I think you're definitely right. It's Gen X and then
Mm,
millennials and then Gen Z and then there's Gen Alpha.
Oh,
which will
right. Okay.
be
Wow.
the next
Yeah.
upcoming generation after us. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's super exciting stuff. Yeah,
Mm.
I was just thinking, I think we're mostly just shaped by, I would say, growing up in a more so kind of digitally connected and just fast-paced world. So I
Mm.
think we do bring new ways of thinking, maybe especially around areas like tech,
Mm.
diversity and work culture. So sometimes we might um, differ, I guess, from our way of thinking might differ from traditional ways of working, but
Mm.
we don't mean to be disruptive, but also we just maybe try to find efficient or kind of like just tech savvy kind of approaches. So I would
Mm.
say one big thing is probably tech. I
Yeah.
think oftentimes we are maybe uh, just because we're used to those, like we're just more comfortable with like digital tools, maybe like social media would be one big
Mm.
thing. Like we're huge on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and whatnot, which are so useful, I think, for outreach and maybe sometimes even client engagement purposes. So yeah, like I was saying, I think being digital natives, which would
Mm.
probably be the appropriate term, I think we're more
Yeah.
comfortable with these kind of emergent platforms, online branding, maybe even, and just virtual collaboration, which I
Interesting.
think,
Mm.
yeah, can be really helpful in helping firms stay relevant, by suggesting kind of how to present themselves online, and just how to streamline communications, and internal processes in general. Yeah. So
What's
that would
your
be
take
one
on
big
the
area.
what's your view on that, Jodie, of the kind of I can't remember the exact terminology you used just then, Chelsea, but I thought it was good. Digital natives, I think it was you said. Yeah, is that have you noticed that with the sort of young trainees coming through Boltway Tennant? I know you do a lot of IT work with them.
Yeah, no, definitely with the technology. Even seeing it now, like I've mentioned, past my
Mm.
daughter's 5 and seeing some of the stuff that she's having to come home with homework, it is all
Mm.
tech based. And there was something the other day that it showed her how to hold her fingers on a keyboard and hold down a shift key to do an uppercase letter. She's in year 1 at school. She's 6 next week. And I was like, I was saying this to the guys the other day, and I was like, I can't believe it. Like I didn't actually learn to type until I was probably about 12 maybe
Yeah.
when I started using a computer. And then
Hmm.
luckily I've done a lot of my school stuff on computers. And yeah, it's nice that they're actually teaching them at this age because realistically, that is what they're going to be doing their education on.
Yeah, so I've got both my kids are at secondary school and they've got an array of different apps, different things for uploading, downloading their homework on. It's a bit almost a bit
Mm.
like being in lockdown again, the amount of kind of stuff that all seems to be.
Mm.
So I'm talking about generation. So I'm somewhere kind of between Generation X and Millennial, where I think it's called Xennial, where you had a digital child, sorry, a analog childhood and then a digital
Mm.
adulthood. I was at a meeting at the school recently, and they got a sixth former out to talk about it. And his advice to all the children was just use AI for everything. And then he turned to all the parents and said because none of them had computers when they were at school, and I was
Mm.
outraged, but also like quite annoyed that he was probably right. I mean, there was like
Mm.
a BBC they'd wheel out on a serving trolley, and maybe you get to have a play on that. But yeah, I mean, it's true. I mean, kids these days just ask a question into their phone, and it just tells them something by AI. I
Mm.
haven't seen too much of that from trainees here yet, but you know it's going on. So I guess it's about sort of supporting them to make sure that actually any research that's done
Mm.
on AI is actually backed up with proper sources and things like that. But I think
Yeah.
there's a lot to learn. I mean, some of my old colleagues started using ChatGPT and things for like
Mm.
getting started on writing opinion pieces and things like that. So there's a lot to be said for
Mm.
it. But I'm certainly not going to be one of the earlier adopters. So
Definitely.
certainly having a
Yeah, I
trainee or
mean,
something like that who understands it would be quite a good thing, really.
exactly. I was thinking, I guess young people and trainees and Chelsea, I don't know what your view on it is are probably the best place to kind of help law firms with entering the kind of AI generation because, lots of firms do want to start using AI, whether it's for, contract drafting or for just, helping out, as you say, with an opinion piece or something for some content for the website. But yeah, what do you think, Chelsea? You mentioned as well, like how, you know, um, younger communities can help with client outreach, but I guess internally, in terms of helping senior partners understand the kind of how AI works, it can be useful too.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think AI is sort of one of those weird things that I think all no matter which generation you're in, I think we're all just kind of navigating through it together because it's so new. I think even for
Mm,
me, I remember it sort of popping up when I was nearing the final year of university, which, was only about 2 years ago. And I was, struggling to understand it myself, trying to use it for my
mm,
dissertation. And then, I was doing a legal dissertation at the time, and then I was struggling to find case law, and I was like, okay, might use ChatGPT as a last ditch. And then it
mm.
generated me this incredible list of cases. So I was like, wow, this is absolutely fantastic. And then turns out they were all made up. So, you know,
Yeah.
definitely still challenges to navigate through as well, even I think as a member of the Gen Z generation. But I think, yeah, definitely internally, I think even just for, I guess, people that feel that they're more confident with navigating through this kind of stuff, like maybe
Mm,
just having regular discussion groups about, for example, if you're using something similar to ChatGPT with your work, what are the best prompts to use? I think those could be really useful in sharing
mm,
and just, yeah, like helping everyone. Because, yeah, I think it's sort of like a generational issue as well. I think, like some people in general just feel less confident with techie stuff,
hmm.
me myself
Yeah.
included. So I think, yeah, having those regular catch-up sessions would be very useful. Um, so yeah, I think
Yeah. Jodie, you're a bit
that's
of a
my take
Chat
on it.
GPT pro, aren't you? I think you sort of, yeah, you're quite au fait with
Yes,
it. Mm,
I love a bit of AI. Literally, where if I need to put a comms together, not so much for like factual evidence kind of stuff, I probably wouldn't rely on it. But if I'm struggling to write a bit of communication, whether it be in a post on our internal intranet or an email that is internal, and I just want to try and get the words out of my head into a bit of paper, essentially, into an email. And I struggle with that because I'm dyslexic. AI has been an absolute lifesaver, but even little things that people overlook with AI. My daughter asked me the other day, what did embarrassing mean? Can I explain to her embarrassing? And I was like, oh, you're putting me on the spot. And I
mm,
was like, Alexa, how do you explain embarrassing to a 5-year-old? And she explained it perfectly. And my daughter understood. But that's AI. And
mm,
I think people think when they think of AI, they think of Copilot, ChatGPT. It's a lot more than that. People don't realize when I'm not going to say it because my phone's going to go off. But when you say, "Hey Siri," it normally listens to you and it goes, "Oh
mm,
yes, how can I help you?" That's all AI. So yeah, I love a bit of AI. I don't like it when people make you feel bad and stupid for using AI. I don't agree with
mm,
that. Um, it's just there to kind of bridge a gap for me,
mm.
essentially. And I really enjoy AI. I don't know how I got through school without it, to be honest.
Yeah, I suppose I'm I'm a bit of a novice with it at the moment, but yeah, it's definitely something that I'm hoping that some of our sort of yeah more tech savvy colleagues can kind of help with as time goes on, because I think it's something we're all going to have to get to grips with. Just want to turn back briefly, if we can, to the conversation on diversity, because um, Chelsea, I'd be interested to get your opinion on this, and it might be a difficult question to answer, but I was just wondering when you came into the profession a couple of years ago, I think you're third year trainee, aren't you? Did it strike you as a diverse profession? Did it, or were you still quite struck that it was predominantly kind of, I suppose, white British middle class people? What was your take on it in your first sort of, yeah, your first few months? I'd be interested in your take on that.
Yeah, no, that's definitely a great question. I actually thought I had a really good impression of the industry, in terms of, yeah, just on the topics of diversity and inclusion, because
Mm,
I think primarily to do with my experience, personal experience as well before that. So
Mm.
before I joined Finnegan, for a proper training contract, I was doing a 2-month internship, focused on trademarks and IP in general abroad in Hong Kong in a local firm. And so I- most people there were predominantly locals. So I think coming from that environment actually to and then Finnegan, where at least for its London office, like there are just so many people coming from all sorts of different backgrounds. I did sort of immediately feel like it was much more welcoming environment in that aspect.
Mm.
Um, and then yeah, I got introduced to IP Inclusive, and so I went to more events naturally focused, had that sort of focus as well. And just yeah, I do feel like I was able to see people from all sorts of walks of life. I think whether that be to do with I don't think that it's only to do with race. I think it's also just, in general, maybe even down to like the degree you did, like at
Mm.
university. I think, like I've met people who did music, who did arts, who did literature, who did history, um, science even. So
Mm.
yeah, just people doing all sorts of things in life and then just yeah, coming together. So that's my impression of the industry. I do feel like it's at a very good position. Yeah,
That's
I
good.
don't know if you
Yeah.
guys would have other perspectives on
Yeah.
that as well.
What about you, Chris? I mean, could you imagine that being the case 10 years ago or?
Um, I mean, it's probably, I think things have changed. And I think a lot of it's to do
Mm.
with, the changing demographic of people and people into university. And
Mm.
I- I'd like to think IP Inclusive's got something to do with it as well. I mean, I
Yeah.
started in a very kind of small firm in Essex, and yeah, that wasn't particularly diverse. And then moving into London, certainly the office as a whole was a lot more diverse, but the not necessarily for fear. There's now I'm in a law firm with about 1,600 people. I'm not entirely sure what the answer is about their diversity, but it seems to be.
Mm.
I'm in offices all around the country, and places like in Birmingham, for example, there's a lot slightly different racial makeup to the one in Carlisle, for example, or the one
Mm.
in Exeter. So, yeah, I think it's probably as long as places kind of reflect their, I suppose, the local population and
Mm.
the sort of people who you can, who work in the local area and people who go to the university in particular towns. I think it's pretty diverse, and yeah, and I think the conversation's moved away from. I think it's almost like it's not really an argument anymore. I know it's come up more recently with Donald Trump and all that. There's lots of people talking about
Mm.
DEI and stuff, but realistically, I haven't seen any firms talking about, oh yeah, maybe we can put a stop to this IP inclusive nonsense. I mean, that just hasn't
Mm.
become a conversation. People
No.
understand and accept that having a diverse workforce is actually a really positive thing, and no one's tempted to, you know, try and change that.
Yeah, I think what you said about, law firms and places of work reflecting the local area is interesting too. And what Chelsea was saying as well about the different backgrounds of people entering the profession. Because I suppose one of the things that's interesting about a law firm is I don't know if this is something that's become more prevalent over the last few years, but increasingly, you see law firms with big marketing departments, whatever, and they're now hiring, IT people. We're talking about AI, so lots of people who don't necessarily have a law background but have a tech background are coming in. People with a BD background, a marketing background. So there's all the kind of different, yeah, a bit of a melting pot, I suppose, that you can bring together, which is good. I mean, yeah, Jodie, what's your view on what the place of, your place of work?
Yeah, we do have. It's nice what Chelsea was saying earlier about
Mm.
not just being diversity about like the obvious
Mm.
things we look at, but like different qualifications you've done to get into the profession. I've
Mm.
done obviously my standard what I need to do to be adequate to train IT, but I've done a bit of a rounded route into IT training. So yeah, it's quite nice that it that you got that diversity aspect of it as well.
One thing looking forward, I suppose, is obviously it seems like we are in a good place at the moment, and from what everyone's saying, it's there's lots of reasons to be positive. Do either of you, Chelsea or Chris or Jodie as well, do you think the legal industry needs to change to remain attractive to the next generation? And is there anything in particular you'd be able to put your finger on in terms of how it can keep remaining attractive to people who are thinking about entering the profession? Chris, why don't we start with you on that one?
People are finding it harder and more expensive. Or some
Mm,
people find it harder to go to university. The cost of it is through the nose. And I was talking to some of the trainee solicitors here, and the amount they're now having to pay back in tuition fees is obscene. And yeah, so talking to a colleague from Marks and Clark, and I think they've got their first apprentice patent attorneys joining, so they wouldn't have a degree.
oh,
I think they
nice.
call them
Yeah.
patent scientists. So
Mm,
I think as long as you're aware of the fact that it's not just a case of go to university, get degree, become patent attorney or trademark
mm,
attorney, that you actually have more varied routes into the profession because you want to be able to attract the best people, whether they've got the best technical background or they've got the best communication skills or the best legal mind or they're great at marketing. You want to be able to attract the best people, which means having an open mind to the various different routes in which people can actually um, qualify or can actually enter the
mm.
profession. So I think that was quite an important thing that seems to be starting to change.
Yeah, definitely. Chelsea, anything you'd like to see change or any recommendations for the legal industry to remain attractive?
I think I can think of two things, I guess. I
Mm,
think the first thing, whilst we're staying on the topic of sort of diversity and inclusion, I think it would be great to see that there is representation for all sorts of diverse backgrounds, maybe more so in leadership roles. So
mm.
maybe on sort of partner level. I think that's really important in showing that success really is possible for everyone. And I think, that's what younger professionals look up to. It's like, who's on the leadership sort of level.
Is that
Um,
lacking a bit at the moment, would you say? So maybe in
I
the
would
entry to the
say,
profession, it's quite diverse, but further up, it's less so. Mm,
yeah,
mm,
definitely. I don't think that's specific to the IP world. I think
mm,
even just a wider legal profession, or even, so many other professions like finance, consultancy. I think it's just in general.
mm,
Um, I think, yeah, that does reduce a bit when it comes to, I mean, the higher up you go, I guess. For example, maybe there is, I think the most obvious example I can think of is maybe, for example, as a woman, as you, I guess, progress in your life in general, you have to start having considerations about having kids, having
mm,
families. And so you naturally just devote more time in that regard and you find it a little bit harder to focus on work. And I think that kind of impacts that sort of progress as well. So it would be great to see if firms could come up with more ways to just offer more support in that to change the status quo. Yeah.
mm,
I think, yeah, the other thing I can think about is maybe just ensuring that there's enough flexibility and work-life balance. I think especially after COVID, we're not
mm,
really so used to the traditional model of, long hours, 9 to 5, 5 days a week in the office anymore. I think especially for younger professionals who only started working in the recent couple years or so, I think remote working options would be very valuable to have, and I think maybe in certain places they even expected.
mm.
Um, so yeah, I think it would be important to keep that in the future as well.
Did you get, just thinking of work-life balance, I'm just curious to know, did you get put off at all, or did you get concerned at all by in when you were thinking about entering the profession, the kind of stories we see of the sort of big, I suppose it's the US firms, the big city firms where, they pay an enormous amount to trainee associates, but I suppose the other side of the coin is that you sort of give your life to this firm for 5 years, whatever it is. Or did that sort of niggle in the back of your mind at all when you were looking at qualifying? Do you think it's all going to be like that, or is it clear that that's just a select group of firms, do you think?
Yeah, no, that's an interesting question. I think I definitely had that expectation coming in. It
Mm,
wasn't so much of a worry of mine because in my mind I was like, I like what I'm doing. I think I'll definitely very enjoy it. So I don't really
mm,
care so much about the long working hours. I think coming from a law background, many of my friends have gone on to practice in other areas of law. more
Mm.
so to do with finance, maybe, for example, M&A or commercial law, where their working hours are much longer
Yeah.
than what I've seen in the IP industry. So that, sort of like, I guess you go in from 9 a.m. and you stay till 11 p.m. That's like expected of
Mm.
you. That kind of working life was, I kind of expected that in my mind. And then
Mm.
coming into the IP industry, um, yeah, definitely feel like I have a much better work-life balance than expected,
Well, fair play
Um,
to you for coming in thinking that's what you're going to have to do and sticking with it. That's impressive.
Thank you. Um, but yeah, I think having a great working environment, a great team of colleagues as well is so important. I think
Mm.
I'm very lucky that where I work right now offers that, everyone is just so supportive. So yeah, I think work-life balance for me hasn't been so much of an issue so far. But yeah, I would be interested to hear about whether that's, you know, the case or whether, yeah, there
Mm.
are other
Yeah.
similar cases in other places.
Yeah. Chris, what's your approach to work-life balance with the trainees and the juniors at your firm? Yeah, how can you go about sort of supporting their needs in that regard?
Um, to be honest, I don't think I've worked anywhere which has a kind of like long hours
Mm.
culture, really. I mean, yeah, if you've got
Mm.
a deadline, you've got a deadline, you've got to do it.
Mm.
But generally speaking, people are pretty good with they're very professional and diligent in terms of making sure they actually do a full day's work.
Mm.
If they turn up late, they work late. Sometimes they come in early and leave early. I mean, I used to work part time for a decade after I had kids.
Mm.
Back at secondary school now, so I'm full time now, and I don't know how people cope, to be honest. Um, so I think it's setting an example from the top, and making sure you don't. I don't know. I think it's important to have a work-life balance, and I think it's part of the firm's culture. And I think the reality is sometimes, if you want to earn mega bucks and want to work for a Magic Circle firm, go ahead. But they're going to rinse you, and if you want to have a sort of more relaxed life,
Mm.
then you can do that too. I mean, as long as I think as you're professional and do what's expected of you, and know that sometimes you've got to work late, sometimes you might not have to, then I think people are happy. But I think you've got to understand that we've all got lives outside of work as well, and occasionally you need to be supportive of people if they've got to run off early, or maybe sometimes pick up work if in the hope that if the shoe's on the other foot, someone will help you out as well. I think it's just about having a positive culture where people are, well, yeah, professional. I'll use that word again. I think
Mm.
I think we all know if somebody's working and if somebody isn't. Um,
Yeah, definitely.
at the end of the day, we're getting paid to do a job, so
Yeah,
I think it's important just to but there is a balance.
sure. Yeah, no, I understand. Okay, that's all really interesting. I think we've sort of had a good chat about the whole, yeah, the future of IP, and it seems like it's in safe hands, I'd say, which is good. And yeah, I suppose, yeah, what's next then, Chelsea? What's in the immediate pipeline for IP Futures? Is there anything sort of coming up that we should be looking out for, or what's in your what's in your horizon?
Yeah, definitely. So, for IP Futures, we are organizing more networking events as per usual. We have one that's focused on women in IP coming up in November, and I think yeah, an advertisement just got out for that. So yeah, I'd say definitely watch out for it. Such a great, topic of discussion, and it's going to be a great crowd as usual. Yeah.
Great. Okay. Well, we'll look forward to that for sure. Okay. I think that sort of is a good place to wrap up. And I'd like to say, thanks again to you, Chelsea, for joining us. And
Thank
same to
you.
you. Yeah. And same to you, Chris. Again, thanks for coming on this episode as well.
Thank you.
And thanks, Jodie, for helping me, navigate the conversation.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.